Tottenham Hotspur, the good, the bad and the ugly. All of that pre-season excitement, all of the hype around new signings, everything we were anticipating, all of the comments that Ange Postecoglou made in the build-up to our opening game against Leicester City. It's all come, it's all gone, and it's already all been forgotten. Now, this is not going to be a negative video. I am not sitting here and saying that Tottenham are in turmoil and that things have gone to pot. I am not saying that at all. This is simply going to be a breakdown and analysis of Tottenham's 1-1 draw with Leicester, Monday Night Football, the last game in the opening round of Premier League fixtures. There was plenty of good, but there was also plenty of bad. It was very much same old Tottenham in some ways. We saw similar patterns emerge. We saw the team drop points from a position of strength, dominating but not taking their chances, having opportunities to put the game to bed but failing, and then letting the opposition back in with a very, very silly goal. Ultimately, Ange Postecoglou's posture and pose, while Richarlison missed a header at the end of the game, sums up how every Tottenham fan is feeling. I want to talk about what's good as well as bad. I want to talk about what we did well and what positives we can take away from that 1-1 draw with Leicester. And that's where I want to start. Now, we all know how easy it is to be negative and critical of the team, especially when a result doesn't go our way. However, it's always good to have perspective. We know that we drew the first game of the season last year and then we were unbeaten for 9 more games after that. Yes, last night's draw with Leicester was not perfect. You could perhaps describe the performance as wasteful, as lethargic, as lacking a bit of sharpness. But Ange will be aware of that and he will be working incredibly hard across the week to stamp out those mistakes as we prepare for the Everton game. So let's break it down. What was good about Tottenham's 1-1 draw with Leicester? And I know it's a very difficult place to start because nobody is realistically going to sit there and say, yeah, it was good. I'm really, really happy with what happened last night, because we didn't win the game and we should have done. Let's talk about arguably what I think the biggest positive to come from the game was, and that was Dominic Solanke's debut. Now look, again, I'm not saying that it was a perfect debut. There were times in the game where Solanke struggled to get himself involved. He was perhaps being bypassed by the midfield and the ball was just constantly going out to the wingers, and he wasn't necessarily getting on the end of what he should have been. However, there was a lot to like about how he performed. For his first game in a Tottenham shirt, I'm very happy with how it went. Solanke was occupying all the right positions that we were expecting him to. Now, we know that Son and Brennan Johnson, the focal points in most of our attacks, going out wide and driving into the box. Solanke was always occupying the right positions to try and turn home efforts and shots if he could. He had 3 shots across the game, all 3 of them going on target. One of them in the first half was a diving header that he perhaps should have scored from. And then, of course, there was another one in the second half when the game was at 1-1, which he sort of put straight at the keeper, which suggests that he is perhaps lacking a little bit of confidence in his new environment around his new teammates. And yes, perhaps that did cost us 3 points on the night. However, he very much could have been a ghost for the entire game and he wasn't. As well as his 3 shots, he created a chance, he had 8 touches in the opposition box and he won 8 out of 10 of his duels. He just needs to find that scoring touch. And after watching him properly for the first time in a Tottenham shirt last night, I can confidently say he will find that scoring touch. Saturday's game against Everton provides the perfect opportunity for him to get off the mark, and I do truly believe that he is going to be an excellent asset for Tottenham and Ange Postecoglou this season. Another player who stood out particularly in the first half was James Maddison. Of course, playing against his former club in Leicester, he dominated proceedings. He got himself onto the ball very, very often. He dropped deep to pick things up and orchestrated most of our attacks. We know he got the assist for Pedro Porro's goal. We know that he was able to drive into the box, take on his men, and he was also looking for the passes as well. Everything pointed to the James Maddison that we have been missing for months. He truly looked back to his old self, and yes, okay, he did drop off in the second half and he was pretty much nowhere to be seen, but so were most of the players in the second half. If Maddison can bottle that first half performance and deploy that across 90 minutes and just can fully get himself back up to the sharp levels that we saw in that first half, then we will see a lot more from the midfielder in the coming weeks. So what else was good about Tottenham's performance last night? Well, in the first half, the 2 fullbacks were excellent, almost faultless. Look, put the second half aside for a second because Udogie looked like he was lacking fitness in the second half, and Pedro Porro, okay, yes, he wasn't necessarily great defensively, but let's talk about the first half for the moment. I want to focus on these positives. The overloads that both Udogie and Porro were making were essential to us dominating the ball and having over 70% possession in the game. They were able to occupy more central positions, Udogie in particular driving past his men and getting the ball into the box. Meanwhile, Pedro Porro almost played alongside Solanke up top, and his positioning was exactly what allowed him to score the opening goal with that deft little header into the far corner. Udogie won every duel against his man in the first half, and yes, I know he dropped off in the second and he looked off it. But unfortunately, as much as we don't like to say it and think it, with the lack of pre-season that some of these players have had, it is going to take a couple of games for them to fully get back up to the level we expect them to be at. It was very similar with Bentancur as well. He looked back to his old self, prime Antonio Conte, Rodrigo Bentancur-esque. He was pulling the strings, he was getting the passes, driving forward. Of course, we know that he had to go off injured in the end, and we wish him all the best. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. He was another that dropped off. We definitely lost the midfield battle in the second half. The only positives that we can probably take from that second half were a couple of the substitutes that came on, in particular Lucas Bergvall and Dejan Kulusevski. I thought it was incredibly harsh to leave Kulusevski out of that starting 11. I was convinced that he was going to start over Brennan Johnson. Having watched him in pre-season, he looked the sharpest and the fittest of every player in the squad. And when he came on, he proved that he was at a level above some of the other players in the team. He drifted from a central to a wider role, and he sort of dictated play, riding challenges as he does, getting into dangerous positions in the box. And looking back on it on hindsight, I do think that we would have benefited more from him in the starting 11, and I think he will earn his place against Everton on Saturday. Lucas Bergvall was an excellent replacement for James Maddison, and again, people were suggesting that he perhaps should have started over the midfielder. He was never really going to, but he had a lot of positive moments when he came on. Look, I know that he nearly cost us a goal at the end, and Vicario did have maybe a bit too much of a go at him, considering he's 18 years old and just having his Premier League debut. But if he wants to play at this level, then he has to be aware that mistakes like that are going to be costly. But at the other end of the pitch, Lucas Bergvall was exceptional. He was driving past his players, he was picking out dangerous passes, playing through the lines, into the gaps. He had lots of really good moments. Completed 25 of his 26 passes in 12 minutes of play, 39 touches overall, completed 2 of his 3 dribbles. And if James Maddison continues to drop off in the second half like that, Bergvall is certainly going to push him for a place in that starting 11 in the very near future. Kulusevski as well had 11 touches in the opposition box since coming on. That is the second most for a Spurs player in the entire game. So again, it poses the question, why was he not starting? I feel like that leads into the perfect avenue to talk about what did go wrong in that second half against Leicester, because a lot did. I think me and a lot of you guys watching will be aware that the second half was very much a familiar story for Tottenham. We just seemed to fall off the cliff. Our levels completely dropped. The intensity went and the quality just dipped. Everyone was poor in the second half. Regarding perhaps those 2 substitutes that I've already mentioned, everybody's level hit the floor. Romero was at fault for that Leicester goal. He left his man completely. I don't know if he was expecting Pedro Porro to come in behind and cover him as an open man, or he wasn't aware that Vardy was lurking back there. But him alongside Udogie and alongside Mickey van der Ven as well, they didn't look fully fit. And that is a consequence of all of the international football we had this summer and then missing those pre-season games as well. The midfield battle completely got away from us in the second half, and Didi and Harry Winks were pulling the strings. The quality that we have in that team, we should never be allowing that to happen. And in my personal opinion, it highlighted the need even more for us to bring in an established first team number 6. What Tottenham need is their very own Rodri, and I know there's very little calibre of players out there that can do the job that Rodri did, but we need someone to come in there that is going to make us, that is going to provide protection in front of the defence and be able to do those jobs in the opposition half as well. Look, the options we have are good enough. Pat Matasar, Yves Bissouma, Bentancur, Archie Gray, Lucas Bergvall. Yes, we have a lot of options, but I feel like they all lack that defensive presence that someone like Rodri has, and it has such a big impact to how successful Manchester City are. As much as I don't want to say it, we did miss Yves Bissouma and his ability to create tight angles and play under pressure in the middle of the park, particularly in the second half. But then again, there were so many other ineffective players on the pitch at that point. I think Heung-min Son had a reasonably poor game. I think he was nowhere in the second half. His first touch was awful and he looked knackered. Personally, I think that he stayed on the pitch way longer than he should have done. He only had 1 shot across the entire match and created just 1 chance. His dribbling stats were relatively good, completing 4 of his 6 attempted. However, there just wasn't any end product from him. As our captain and one of our greatest players in the modern era, we do expect a bit more from him, and I think he is rightly allowed to have some criticism. I'm not saying that that is going to be his level for the season, but yesterday in the second half, I think he would be the first one to tell you that he just wasn't good enough, unfortunately. Brennan Johnson as well, he worked hard, he won his duels, he put in a lot of tackles, but his job is to be effective in the final third, and he just wasn't. He only attempted 1 dribble in the match, and he didn't even get past his man. He only attempted 2 passes into the final third, and he didn't complete a single successful cross. As I mentioned at the start of this video, it was the same pattern. We let teams stay in the game. Leicester would have been delighted to only be 1-0 down at half time. They came out in the second half firing, and until they scored their goal, they were on top, and even afterwards they were as well. They looked the likeliest team to win it. It wasn't until Ange made those changes that did we take back control of the game. However, when you had the likes of Timo Werner on the right-hand side, it never really looked like we were going to score. Richarlison was playing a deeper role, and like Son, his first touch just wasn't there. It was just all a little bit of a mess, really, wasn't it? The conclusion is this: there is plenty to take away from that game. Yes, we are all disappointed and we all have a right to be disappointed, but it's very important we don't go over the top with the negativity and the criticism. It is only the first game of the season. As much as we hate to admit it, a lot of our starting players missed most of pre-season due to their extended holidays, and they're clearly just not quite up to the level yet. We do have a tough run coming up, so it does make this game against Everton on Saturday incredibly important. It is so vital for us to get off to a winning start at home. But we have to support the team. As I said, we went on a 10-match unbeaten start last season, and the first game started with a draw against Brentford away. Ange will change things for Everton. He will work incredibly hard across the week during training to make sure the mistakes don't continue happening, and I am sure we will be more effective in the final third. The draw against Leicester was a game of ups and downs. There was plenty of positives in the first half, but just as many negatives in the second half. But let's stay behind the team, hope that we can turn it around and get our first 3 points of the season this weekend and go on a run. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. But for now, that's it from me. Enjoy the rest of your week. Don't let Tottenham get on top of you too much. And as always, come on you Spurs.